I woke up with one less organ and one less reason to live. The first thing I saw after surgery wasn't Julie. It was the ceiling fan spinning above me like nothing had changed. I had expected her face, her voice, maybe a soft thank you, or just her hand in mine. But there was no one. The nurse said she'd already left. She didn't even wait until I opened my eyes. I reached for my phone with the hand that didn't have a needle in it and sent her a message. "Your dad made it. The transplant was successful." No reply. I checked the message again. Read. I blinked, confused. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was busy. I opened her profile. Blocked. Everywhere. Instagram, gone. WhatsApp, gone. Even LinkedIn, gone. Lay there, half a man, staring at the screen like it had betrayed me, and that's when someone else sent me a screenshot. No caption. Just an image. A proposal. Julie, wearing a shimmering white dress on a rooftop, saying yes to another man, Roberto. A millionaire businessman, she once said, was just an annoying client. That annoying client had slipped. A diamond ring onto her finger while I was still bleeding from an incision made for her father. I laughed. Loud. So loud the nurse came running in thinking I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Because what kind of man gives up a kidney for a family that sees him as disposable? I didn't give that kidney to her father. I gave it to her. And now, she was someone else's bride. Still groggy, I stood up, removed the IV from my arm, and asked to be discharged early. The nurse looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was, because when I stepped out of that hospital and saw Julie standing beside Roberto's Porsche, adjusting her veil while checking her reflection in his car window, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just whispered to myself, she better pray nothing ever happens to that kidney. Because if life gives me a second chance... When Julie and I first met, she wasn't wearing designer heels or diamond earrings. She was sitting, alone under a broken street lamp, crying over a chemistry midterm she'd failed, hugging a cracked phone with a dying battery. It was raining, and her umbrella had snapped in the wind. I offered her mine, and she took it without looking up. She didn't thank me. She didn't even smile. But I remembered her face for weeks. Back then, I was just the guy who fixed computers in the dorms for extra cash. Didn't drink, didn't party, kept my head down and saved every rupee like it mattered. Because it did. I had no backup plan, no rich father, no trust fund, just a mother who worked herself half to death cleaning homes and a father I hadn't seen since I was 9. Julie didn't even know my name until the 3rd semester. She was already orbiting in a different world. One filled with perfume I couldn't pronounce and handbags that had names more expensive than mine. I only got close to her because her laptop crashed a night before a final. I offered to fix it for free. That's how it started. She said I was sweet. She started waving to me in the halls, asking me to walk her to class, complimenting my shirt even though it was the same 2 I rotated every week. For the first time in my life, someone saw me, or at least pretended to. We weren't together. Not officially. She'd never let me hold her hand in public, never kissed me, never told her friends about me. But when she needed something, notes, food, cash, a shoulder, I was always there. And sometimes, late at night, she'd call me and talk for hours about her dreams, her loneliness, her father's declining health, and how she felt like no one truly cared. I listened every single time. When her father collapsed and needed a transplant, I didn't hesitate, not for a second. Still remember the silence on the phone after I told her. She didn't say thank you. She just asked, "Are you sure?" I said yes, because I thought we were real. She promised she'd wait during the surgery, that she'd be there when I woke up. But the bed next to me was empty. No flowers, no notes, just my hospital bill sitting. On the tray beside a jug of room temperature water, that was Julie. She never said things straight, never told me I mattered, but she let me believe it. Just enough. I used to think maybe she was just emotionally guarded. Or scared. Now I know better. She was emotionally bankrupt, and I was the fool who gave her credit. After the transplant, the phone call stopped. Her number rang once, then went dead. Her social media disappeared one by one, like I was being erased in real time. All traces of the nights we spent walking under campus lights, all the ramen cups we shared when her card declined, gone. Like they never happened. She didn't even warn me, didn't even lie. Just vanished. I thought maybe something was wrong. Maybe something happened until that rooftop photo dropped. Julie in white, Roberto beside her. She never even looked back. Everyone thinks love is about grand gestures, roses, rings, poems, but love is in the small, quiet things, picking someone up from class when it rains, waiting outside the exam hall just to walk them home, offering your kidney without asking for a promise. In return, Julie took all of it, and then she threw me away like I was an expired donation. She wasn't always cold. That's what made it worse. Sometimes when she thought no one was watching, she'd laugh with her whole face. She'd bite her lip when she was nervous. She'd fold her receipts like origami when she was thinking, and she had this way of talking about pain that made you think you'd never understand it. Turns out she just hated being powerless, not being worshipped. Roberto gave her a new life, money, status, glitter, and I was just the donor whose story wasn't glamorous enough to be part of the wedding invitation. I should have seen it coming, should have known. But how do you prepare for someone selling your heart in exchange for a luxury honeymoon? I never wanted revenge, not in the beginning. I just wanted closure, an explanation, a sentence, even a lie. But Julie gave me silence. And sometimes silence is louder than any goodbye. That's when something inside me cracked, not loudly. Not like glass, more like a seam tearing quietly through a stitched-up wound. Julie made one mistake. She left me alive, and now I had nothing left to lose. The first time I saw Julie again after the transplant, she wasn't wearing white. She was in red, blood-red heels, a low-cut dress. Hair curled perfectly, lips lacquered in the same shade as the soles of her stilettos. She looked like she had just stepped out of a commercial. I looked like I had just stepped out of a hospital. We crossed paths outside a luxury restaurant. I wasn't even there to eat. I was delivering a refurbished tablet to a client. Still had the receipt sticking out of my pocket. I thought it was coincidence. Until I saw Roberto. He stepped out right behind her, hand on the small of her back like it belonged there. He kissed her temple while laughing at something she whispered. She didn't even flinch. I stood there, just feet away, frozen like an idiot with hospital tape still stuck on my wrist. She glanced my way, a flicker of recognition. Then nothing. Like I was the waiter, or the guy hired to open the door. Roberto noticed me. He tilted his head, smiled, and then said something that confirmed everything. "So this is the guy you said was obsessed with you?" Julie's lips curved into that smile, the one she used, when she was trying to be polite but really meant, "You're beneath me." I didn't say a word, not a syllable. I just walked past them like I hadn't spent 2 nights in surgery for her father, like I hadn't been awake when they wheeled him into post-op, like I hadn't said a prayer for her even after she vanished. Later that night, I checked my messages again. Still blocked. That's when the storm started. Not outside, inside me. I hadn't just lost a girl. I'd lost a piece of myself I couldn't regrow. I tried telling myself it was over, that I'd move on, but the world had other plans. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. From the hospital, it was a reminder. My post-op checkup was overdue, and also a copy of the medical consent form I had signed. Standard protocol, except this copy had notes written on it. In handwriting that wasn't mine, it was Julie's. I recognized the way she looped her F, always a little tilted. She had scribbled something in the margin. "Make sure he doesn't know until after surgery." It wasn't addressed to me. It was a note to her mother. She planned it, all of it. The tears, the midnight calls, the sudden warmth, the way she told me her father wouldn't survive another year on dialysis. She manipulated every move, every emotion, every crack in my walls I had never really been loved. I had been used. I went cold after that. Not angry, not explosive, just silent. I stopped fixing laptops, stopped messaging mutual friends, stopped going outside unless it was necessary, and in that quiet, something darker settled in. Not revenge. Not yet, just this relentless ache to understand. Why? Why I wasn't good enough to even deserve a goodbye. Why a man who gave his body wasn't even worth a 2-line text. Why love, when given without condition, still wasn't enough. Then one night, I ran into Carolyn. We weren't close, just vaguely connected through mutual friends back in university. She was always the quiet one, always watching. The kind of girl who noticed things others missed. She saw me at the pharmacy, holding painkillers I didn't need and a can of soup I wouldn't eat. She didn't say hi, she just stared for a while, then asked gently, "Did you see her wedding video?" I hadn't. I didn't want to. She said, "You should." I went home and searched it. Julie's wedding wasn't in a church. It was on a yacht. Some high-production affair with drone shots, piano overlays, guests clapping in slow motion. And right, in the middle of it, during her vows, she said something that hit harder than any of it. I used to believe love meant sacrifice, that you had to give and give until you had nothing left. But then I realized, real love is never about suffering. It's about knowing your worth and walking away from the ones who hold you back. The crowd clapped. Roberto smiled. Julie kissed him as the fireworks went off in the background. That night I sat on my floor with the lights off and no sound but my own breathing. That was the moment the ache shifted. It stopped asking why and started whispering how. How do I make sure Julie never forgets what she did? How do I take the part of her that used people like currency and bankrupt it? How do I make her remember that before the yacht, before the diamonds, before Roberto? There was me, and I gave her something no one else ever would, a part of myself that can't be replaced. So if she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. I'd become the ghost she couldn't silence. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was waking up every morning, forgetting for half a second that she was gone, then remembering it all at once. There were days I'd still reach for my phone out of habit, scrolling to her name, ready to text her about a weird dream or a new ramen place I found, and then I'd freeze. Realize I was blocked. Again. Still, she hadn't just left. She had erased me, deleted our photos, unlinked Spotify, removed every trace of me like I was just some phase she outgrew, some lesson she'd rather forget. But I couldn't forget. Not when I couldn't sleep on my left side for more than 20 minutes because the surgical scar would start burning. Not when I saw her father's name on my hospital file, as the organ recipient. Not when I still remembered the exact sound of her voice whispering, "Thank you. You saved my whole family." What was I supposed to do with that? How do you heal when the wound keeps breathing? Some nights I'd sit by the window and count the cars passing by, trying to convince myself I wasn't waiting for her. But the truth sat heavy on my chest. I was waiting for a message, a phone call, a confession, anything. Just something that said I mattered. But it never came. All that came was silence and the twisted realization that she was doing just fine, living it up. Champagne toasts, yacht parties, designer bags she used to call wasteful now dangled from her wrist like war trophies. And right next to her in every photo, Roberto, polished, grinning, hands always on her waist like he owned her. I wanted to scream, tear the screen in half. But even my rage felt tired. I wasn't angry because she left. I was angry because she used love like a weapon, and I handed her the ammunition. Every part of me that had ever believed in sincerity felt hollow now. What kind of man gives his kidney to a girl's father and ends up forgotten in the very story he helped write? What kind of love was this? I started looking at myself differently, started wondering if I was born to be disposable. Raised, on quiet sacrifice, conditioned to believe that love was pain, that if you gave more, suffered more, tolerated more, you'd eventually be chosen. But that wasn't how it worked. Julie didn't choose kindness. She chose power. She chose Roberto, not because he loved her better, but because he came with a future she could profit from. I was never her choice, just her convenience, and when she was done collecting what she needed, my affection, my time, my kidney, she cut the cord. Cold. Surgical. I kept replaying the timeline in my head. When had it started? When did she decide I wasn't enough? Was it before the surgery? After? Had she kissed me knowing she'd disappear the moment she got what she needed? The thoughts didn't stop. They multiplied. They coiled around each other like snakes, tightening every night. Sleep stopped coming. I walked for hours just to exhaust myself, read entire books I couldn't remember a word of. Sometimes I'd sit in cafes and stare at couples, wondering how they could touch each other so casually, how they could laugh without doubting everything. Then one evening I ran into Julie's mother. She was buying flowers. Alone. I almost turned and walked the other way. But something in me froze when she saw me. Because her smile dropped. Her hands trembled. And when I tried to keep walking, she said my name. Ronnie. I didn't reply. She stepped closer. The flowers wilted slightly in her grip. You look thinner, she said softly. Are you eating enough? I almost laughed. After everything her daughter did, she was worried about my appetite. I stared at her for a long time, unsure if I wanted to scream or hug her, but all I managed to say was, "Did you know?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. That silence was louder than anything else. She knew. They all knew. Julie didn't just fall for someone else. She engineered it. She left me on purpose, and her family helped her do it. I walked away before I said something cruel, and when I got home, I sat on the floor for hours, unable to move. That night, Carolyn called. She'd been quiet lately, checking in occasionally but never pushing. She must have sensed something in my voice. Come out, she said. You need air. We met at an old tea shop on the corner of a quiet street. She ordered 2 cups of green tea and said nothing for a while. Then finally she asked, Do you still love her? I stared down at my hands. They were trembling. I didn't know if it was from anger or grief. I don't know, I whispered. Good, she said. That means you're healing. Healing. What a stupid, slow, exhausting word. But it stayed with me. The idea that maybe, not today, not tomorrow, but one day, I wouldn't flinch at the sound of Julie's name. That one day I wouldn't feel hollow when someone asked about my scar. Maybe I'd even tell them the truth, that I loved someone once. So deeply, I gave away part of myself for her family, and she left. But I didn't die. I was still here. Breathing. And maybe that meant something. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of gray, forgettable afternoon where nothing is supposed to change. I had just stepped out of a hardware store, holding a bag of light bulbs and wall hooks, trying to fix up the apartment so it didn't feel like an abandoned storage unit anymore. I wasn't looking for drama, but drama found me. Because as I turned the corner, a glossy black car pulled up beside me, sleek, silent, and far too expensive for the neighborhood. The tinted window rolled down, and Julie's father looked straight at me. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. He looked older, paler, but unmistakably him. The same man I once saved, the reason my body would never quite be whole again. Ronnie, he said, can we talk? I said nothing, just stared at him like he was a ghost, because to me, he was. He opened the door and stepped out, not wearing the rich, smug air of a man whose daughter married a millionaire. He looked tired, like he'd aged 10 years in 6 months. Not here to fight, he said quietly. I owe you that much. Owe me. That word alone nearly made my fists clench, but I kept still. Let him speak. She told me you left, he continued. Said you disappeared after the surgery. Didn't want contact. I stared. She told you I left? He nodded, guilt creeping into his expression. I wanted to reach out, but I was recovering. And she made it sound like you moved on. I laughed. Bitter and short. Moved on? She blocked me, vanished, left me with hospital bills and a silence so heavy it nearly broke me. She lied to you, I said flatly. He looked stunned. And then he said something I didn't expect. She left Roberto. I blinked. What? 3 weeks ago, he said. Walked out. No warning. Just packed a suitcase and vanished. That wasn't possible. Julie had everything she wanted. The designer clothes, the high society friends, the man she traded me for. She's not answering calls, he went on. Not mine, not anyone's. Even Roberto's looking for her. I couldn't help the sharp flicker of anger in my chest. She left again, I muttered. That's what she does now? Uses people until it's inconvenient and disappears? Julie's father shook his head. I don't know what happened, but she left something for you. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a small brown envelope. My name was written on it in her handwriting, shaky, rushed. I didn't open it, not right. Away, just held it, like it might explode. I don't expect you to forgive her, he said softly, and you shouldn't. But I thought you deserved to know. She wasn't as fine as she made it look. I looked at him. Really looked. The man I once respected. The man I suffered for. He looked like he carried a regret he couldn't put down. I said, he added, that you were the only thing she ever truly believed in. And with that, he left. I stood there on the sidewalk, fingers curled around the envelope, heart pounding louder than the traffic. What was in it? Why now? Why after all this time? Back home, I stared at the envelope for an hour before finally tearing it open. There were 3 things inside: a folded note, a photograph, and a check. I opened the note first. Ronnie, I don't know where to start, so I won't pretend I have the right words. I just want you to know, I never stopped thinking about you. I lied. A lot. I was scared. Of love, of loss, of not being enough for someone like you. You gave more than anyone ever has. And I didn't know how to accept that without ruining it. I married Roberto because it was safe, logical. Everything people told me was right. But every night, I still dreamed of you. I couldn't live with it anymore. So, I left. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But maybe someday you'll believe that I really did love you. Julie. I dropped the note, then looked at the photograph. It was us, taken months ago, maybe a year, me smiling like an idiot, her pressed against my arm, eyes shining, like she could see the future. I almost couldn't recognize the man in the photo. I looked happy, whole. Then I checked the check. It was for $50,000. A note scribbled on the back read, "For your surgery." I didn't know how to give it back before. I sat there, silent, emotionless. Because what was I supposed to feel? Closure? Pain? Relief? I wasn't sure. All I knew was, this story wasn't over. 3 days passed before I made up my mind. The letter stayed folded on my desk, the check untouched, the photograph flipped face down like a memory I couldn't bear to keep reliving. I told myself not to care. Told myself Julie's sudden disappearance wasn't my responsibility. But some part of me, the part that still remembered how her laugh made everything feel lighter, knew I wasn't going to just sit still. So I started digging. First, I called every number that used to be hers, all dead. Then I tried her old friends, but half of them didn't even pick up. The ones that did either hadn't seen her or gave cold, clipped answers. Julie doesn't talk to me anymore, one said. Whatever mess she's in now, I don't want to be dragged into it, said another. And then, out of nowhere, Carolyn called me. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Last I knew, she'd cut ties with Julie after a fallout during some trip to Italy. But now her name flashed on my screen like a warning. I answered, and her first words made my blood freeze. "She's in the hospital, Ronnie. She collapsed on the street yesterday. I didn't even ask where. I just ran." The hospital was cold, too clean. Smelled like antiseptic and forgotten promises. When I reached the desk and said Julie's name, the nurse paused. "She's not accepting visitors," she said. I pulled out. My wallet showed ID, tried to reason. Nothing worked. I was about to walk away when a familiar voice came from behind. "Let him in. He's the only one she asked for." It was Julie's father again. I stood there on the sidewalk, fingers curled around the envelope, heart pounding louder than the traffic. What was in it? Why now? Why after all this time? Back home, I stared at the envelope for an hour before finally tearing it open. There were 3 things inside: a folded note, a photograph, and a check. I opened the note first. "Ronnie, I don't know where to start, so I won't pretend I have the right words. I just want you to know, I never stopped thinking about you. I lied. A lot. I was scared. Of love. Of loss. Of not being enough for someone like you. You gave more than anyone ever has. And I didn't know how to accept that without ruining it. I married Roberto because it was safe. Logical. Everything people told me was right. But every night I still dreamed of you. I couldn't live with it anymore. So, I left. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But maybe someday, you'll believe that I really did love you. Julie." I dropped the note, then looked at the photograph. It was us. Taken months ago, maybe a year. Me smiling like an idiot, her pressed against my arm, eyes shining, like she could see the future. I almost couldn't recognize the man in the photo. I looked happy. Whole. Then I checked the check. It was for $50,000. A note scribbled on the back read, "For your surgery." I didn't know how to give it back before. I sat there, silent, emotionless. Because what was I supposed to feel? Closure? Pain? Relief? I wasn't sure. All I knew was this story wasn't over. 3 days passed before I made up my mind. The letter stayed folded on my desk, the check untouched, the photograph flipped face down like a memory I couldn't bear to keep reliving. I told myself not to care. Told myself Julie's sudden disappearance wasn't my responsibility. But some part of me, the part that still remembered how her laugh made everything feel lighter, knew I wasn't going to just sit still. So I started digging. First, I called every number that used to be hers, all dead. Then I tried her old friends, but half of them didn't even pick up. The ones that did either hadn't seen her or gave cold, clipped answers. "Julie doesn't talk to me anymore," one said. "Whatever mess she's in now, I don't want to be dragged into it," said another. And then, out of nowhere, Carolyn called me. I hadn't heard from her in over a year. Last I knew, she'd cut ties with Julie after a fallout during some trip to Italy. But now, her name flashed on my screen like a warning. I answered, and her first words made my blood freeze. "She's in the hospital, Ronnie. She collapsed on the street yesterday. I didn't even ask where. I just ran." The hospital was cold, too clean, smelled like antiseptic and forgotten promises. When I reached the desk and said Julie's name, the nurse paused. "She's not accepting visitors," she said. I pulled out. My wallet showed ID, tried to reason. Nothing worked. I was about to walk away when a familiar voice came from behind. "Let him in. He's the only one she asked for." It was Julie's father again. As I turned to leave, Julie called out softly, "Will I ever see you again?" I paused at the doorway, then said without looking back, "Maybe, but I won't be the one waiting this time." It's been 9 months since I last saw Julie. The seasons shifted quietly, just like everything else. I didn't check up on her. I didn't call her father. I didn't ask anyone for updates, because I didn't need to anymore. I'd already buried the version of myself who begged for closure. That man, the one who waited outside her wedding hall, the one who once stood in a hospital hallway wondering if love was enough, was gone. I didn't need love to survive. I needed something else entirely. So I built it. With the $30 million she paid me and every cent I scraped together. Since I started something, a new foundation, registered under my name only, and I didn't name it after her. I named it after the one thing I'd truly lost in all this, my peace. Project Equinox. A company with one mission, reinvest every broken part of my story into something that wouldn't break me again. Anna, my co-founder, had quietly stepped away, choosing a new life abroad after settling her family feud. Carolyn, surprisingly, reached out again. She never liked Roberto, never trusted Julie. And the moment she learned Julie had ended up in a quiet, half-closed rehab clinic outside the city, she sent me a message. Just one sentence. "She's paying her price, Ronnie. Quietly." I didn't reply, because that wasn't the kind of revenge I needed. I had something bigger in mind. Larger than money, sharper than silence. And it came to me the day I got a call from a major law firm. They were investigating Roberto. Apparently, several shell companies tied to his name had been laundering investor funds, and guess who still had all the old evidence? Text messages, bank transfers, photos. Even a voice recording from the night Julie confessed she knew what Roberto was doing but didn't stop him. Not because she agreed with him, but because she was scared of being poor again. I never planned to. Use it. I truly didn't. Until the lawyer on the phone said, "Mr. Ronnie, if you're willing to testify, we could completely dismantle what's left of his empire." And something cold inside me smiled. I said I'd think about it. But I already knew my answer. Because some people don't learn through love. Some people only understand consequences when the ground disappears under their feet. A month later, Roberto was arrested. The media tried to spin it as a mistake. A misunderstanding, his lawyer claimed, but the paper trail was too clean, too sharp, because I had prepared for this. From the moment I walked out of Julie's hospital room, I knew I'd never get back what I lost. So I decided to take everything they thought I'd never get. My dignity, my power, my future. And when Roberto's face flashed across the evening news in handcuffs with the word fraud etched into every headline, I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I just kept building. Because that was always the end game. Not revenge for revenge's sake, but justice that didn't need to scream. I became the man they thought would crumble, the one they buried, the one they walked away from, and I turned every drop of pain into fuel. Last week, I walked through the doors of a prestigious university to give a speech to a class full of business students. I was wearing a suit I bought with my own money, no handouts, no shadows following me. And afterward, a young woman raised her hand and asked, "What's your advice for someone who's lost everything?" I paused, looked her in the eye, and answered truthfully, "Lose better." She blinked, confused, so I explained, "Losing everything gives you a choice. Either you beg the world to give it back, or you make sure it never had that kind of power over you again." The students nodded. Some clapped. I walked off stage without another word, because some victories don't need loud music or applause. They just need you to survive long enough to make them happen. As I stepped outside, the air was crisp, sunlight spilling between buildings. Quiet reminder that healing didn't come in grand gestures or perfectly written endings. It came in silent mornings. Clean shirts, fruit bought with your own hands, and messages you never send. Carolyn messaged me again last night. Julie left the clinic. No one knows where she went. I stared at the message, didn't feel a thing. No ache, no nostalgia, no spark of what-ifs. Just silence. I placed the phone down. Outside my window, a mother held her daughter's hand as they crossed the street. A cab driver laughed with his passenger, and my world kept moving. The revenge had come. The closure was clean. And as for Julie, wherever she was, I hoped she found something real, even if it wasn't redemption, even if it wasn't peace, just something honest to carry. Because the last thing I ever gave her was something that couldn't be bought, part of my body. But the last thing she gave me was permission to let her go, and I did. I let her go, for good.